So recent data, you might say, is good data. I just picked the recent data. But what is recent data, and is it good enough to automate decisions? I will show you now in a quick demo is how you can see what data is hot, warm, and cold, and what data you can be using and what rather you should not be using, and how you can leverage this to predict let's say figures in the future. In my example, you will see how the net value of written off time recordings and expenses for projects look like, and how you can use that data to predict the future, and how you can sort out data which is cold and you should rather not be using anymore. Let's switch here to system. I'm currently logged on into a classic ByDesign system, and here I have my launchpad, and I find here basically three interesting figures. First of all, this is the whole data store I have in my system. It's my machine learning data all included in the ByDesign system. It's 151,000 documents. It's basically a very small system. You have to be aware that small customers in ByDesign usually have something like 2 million documents of all areas. If it's going to, I don't know, 20 million, then it's getting a bit grower. And our biggest customers have more than 100 million documents in their system. And there you probably understand that it's not so easy to find the needle in the haystack, and that you really need way more information than just the creation date or the open status of a document to understand, is it good to be used? Is it good to predict your future and to bet your future on that? So let me look here into a KPI, which basically tells me what is the net value of time recordings and expenses I have written off in my projects based on the lifecycle information I have stored in ByDesign. So first of all, the basic figures look like this. I have here all my running projects, and I filtered only those which have the top amount of written off times and expense reports. So these are basically projects where I have something like a red number. That project Nanga Parbat is not so nice because 100,000 US dollars I have to write off because I could not invoice that for whatever reason. You see basically for a couple of more projects how that looks like, and what you find here under the hood is basically a status, which tells me from a life cycle status, this is an open and running project. It's hot. You can still use it, but there are also other projects in here which have a life cycle status of end of residence, which basically means it's cold. You can use it. You can use it for training your machine models, also for legal reasons. But it might be a good idea to sort out those projects. And as those projects might be having a very long running time sometimes, it's really an art to define how long your life cycle of your project shall be hot or cold or warm. If I look what is basically under the hood for all my business documents, then you see the same kind of chart here as well. You see now basically the list all of your data, and you see that 58% of the data is open, so hot, you can use it, and 36% is in a state of end of residence, which is basically meaning, well, it's warm, you can still use it. But there is also data where we have reached the end of retention already, and that's 2%. And that projects I should rather not use anymore because they are really cold. It's not good to use them for predictions, but it's also probably not allowed anymore due to legal restrictions like GDPR, like we have it in the European Union. If I expand now the list of my projects which are warm or rather cold, then I can also drill down here into such a project. This is now a project lifecycle view. So just from a lifecycle perspective, I have all my documents indexed, and I find this is a project which has a status stopped or closed. It has been created in 2012. Since 2014, it's already end of residence, so it's really, I should not use that anymore, and I will filter that out. And what you also see is, well, it's a very interesting project. So if I drill down into that a network analysis, I see it's really a significant project. So it has lots of uh, entries created and time recordings created. It has created its references in our sales ledger and in our financial view of the project. I see also sales quotes associated. So I can see here, this is really a project which has lots of context. And if you derive and use that context for your predictions, you can do way better predictions than without that. Now let me show you basically how such a prediction can be looking like. This is basically, I took all the data which I just seen in my report and exported that to our predictive scenario analysis, did basically a regression analysis. And what I learned from that is basically with a confidence level of 99%, I can read out of that old data, excluding the data which is outdated, which is cold, that in 53% of the cases, the project task name has an influencing factor, a contribution to a value being written off. Also, the customer group code seems to be having a significant effect, or the service level, and probably also the customer name is a decisive factor, because some customers are more complicated than others are. I can now use that model to make a prediction with my for the future. So I would upload here, let's say, the data for my last quarter, put it into that, and then I get a fairly reliable prediction. What might be the projects where I might expect larger values of times and expenses to be written off.